Hello and welcome to the November and final edition of the 2017 Quiltmania Mystery Quilt. This last edition, I'm just going to show you how we complete the last block, which is a feathered star, and then just briefly run through the assembly of the quilt. Given that the quilt is now, this parts of the quilt now are fairly large, it's difficult for me to really capture them on the video, so I'll do the best I can. So this month we've got the fabrics that I've laid out here, and from the shirting at the bottom up until the main border fabric we've used all of these fabrics previously, and they're going to be used in the final block, the feathered star block. These last two fabrics, the Torrington yellow or gold stripe is our sashing fabric and also will be used in the binding. And this fabric at the top is the mystery fabric. So I'll just hold that up so that you can see that. Now the mystery fabric is a fabric that I've designed from a reproduction, I've designed from a 1800s fabric that I own. And it's going to only be available through the shops that are participating in the Mystery Quilt program, and you can only get this fabric from them if you participate. So I hope you like it. So what I'd like to show you now is just the construction of this particular block. So I've done the middle part, and that the middle block is completed, and we have here the centre components, and you can see here that the diamond is actually on the square and there isn't a diamond on the triangle section. So when you go to join this, you'll join this is a section here, and you'll see here that when I've joined this on, it's only joined on as a partial seam. So we don't want to actually complete that seam, because if we do that, we can't then attach it to the diamond. So this is left flapping, and when we go to join these rows together, obviously we'll have a second one of these up the top. We'll come down and sew all the way through, and then we'll just fold this back and complete that last little part of the diamond. So there are 13 blocks to complete the quilt, and they are set on point. So hence throughout the videos I've talked about, angling certain motifs just to make sure that they're sitting the right direction. Usually something like the centre ones. Now this is actually computer generated before I started the quilt, so the actual quilt has it's all the same fabrics, but sometimes I've just used a different motif in the middle from that particular fabric, so don't worry about that. The sashing fabric is cut at 2 inches, so it's a 1.5 inch finished sashing fabric. Sometimes when you've got the longer edges, you do have to join this fabric, so if you just join it so that you can match up the stripes, then you'll get a longer length. So this one has actually been joined through this section here, so just take a little bit of care in trying to join that so that it looks like a continuous length. I prefer to have the stripe running that way. I think it's quite effective running that way, and it's also won't use as much fabric as it would if I'd run the stripes down the length. So when we cut these, we cut 18 sashings, 1.5 inches finished, so 2 inches cut by 15.5 inches, and all these instructions are actually in the magazine for you, so don't panic too much. So when it's assembled in rows, so you've got the block at the bottom, and you'll add the sashings to either end of that, the 15.5 inch sashings up to either end of that. Then when you set this row up, you'll have a sashing, a block, a sashing, a block, a sashing, a block, a sashing, and the same as we go through the other blocks. So they're all sitting on an angle on point. Now this mystery fabric here is a directional print. So when you cut that, these larger triangles are cut as a large square, 22 3/8 of an inch, cut into 4 across the diagonal. So from one edge to the other edge, so that you've got the straight edge of the triangle are running along the edge of the quilt. Now, because this is a directional print, when you cut this, you'll actually have a top, a side, a bottom, and the opposite side. So you've got a left side and a right side, and that will keep your direction of your fabric in the right direction. So when you cut these two blocks, so you'll have two squares and you'll cut them to get two tops, two bottoms, two lefts and two rights. Make sure that you put them into 4 distinct piles so that you know where that should go in the quilt. As I've said, you'll join this together, and then you'll add the quarter square triangles to the top and to the bottom of that, making sure that you've got the direction in the right way, but also making sure that you've got the straight edge running along the left hand side on this particular block and on the bottom along this particular block. So I'm going to get just show you on the progress on my quilt, because I haven't actually assembled. I'm in the process of assembling it, and because of space and trying to hold it up, I can't actually hold it up too much for you to see, but I've been able to pin the bottom and the top corners on a board, so that just to show you exactly what I'm talking about. So as you can see, this is the bottom left hand corner down here, and we've got the top right hand corner on the other side. So I've joined the 15.5 inch cut sashing onto the block at the top and the bottom. And when I've cut these too, I've tried to make sure that I've got the centre of the sashing always the same, so the same part of the sashing, so that you get a little bit of continuity with the stripes as it goes through. Sometimes that's a bit tricky to get it right, so don't worry too much. But if you can try and do that, it's probably harder along these straighter edges, but if you keep the centre always the same, then that gives you a little bit of an advantage to try and get them right. So I've joined the sashing on, as I've said. I then join this quarter square triangle, and we've got the straight edge running along the edge of the quilt, so we want to make sure that we position that correctly, and at the other end of it we've got the straight edge running along the bottom of the quilt, because obviously the quilt turns the quilt. This sashing here is cut at 18.5 inches, and that gets attached to the bottom section because it's now covering these sashings as well. And as you can see, there is a triangle on the end of this that's going to project. I always leave that on until I've added the rest of it, and then I can come back and actually make sure that I get that nice and straight when I cut it off. You can then add this triangle here to complete that corner. So if you look at the top, we've also done the same thing at the other end. So this is the top of the quilt, and it's exactly the same, just a mirror image. So, and this is the top corner as well, so that you've got the top right corner and the bottom left corner. Now this length of sashing here that I've pinned on is cut, this piece of sashing here is cut at 51.5 inches, and it will be sewn onto this completed section here, so the corners. Similarly, there'll be another one exactly the same length that'll be cut on and sewn on this side. Now I'm going to hold up the remaining lengths just so that you can see how they go, and hopefully you'll be able to see them, given that I'm unable to pin them onto anything, just to show you. So I'll show you those. So this, as I've said, this will be attached to the sashing that's going to be attached to that corner section, and then another section of sashing 84.5 inches cut will be attached to the other side of this one. Similarly, now this section here is the section that runs adjacent to this corner here. So it's assembled exactly the same way as the one we've just spoken about. Just making sure again that you get the mystery fabric running in the right direction so that it's running across the top. Now this section here is the section that runs against this top corner. It's assembled exactly the same way as the other one, but just ensure that because this is now on the opposite side and doing the opposite corner, you want to make sure that these straight edges are running across the top at this end, and then it runs along the side of the quilt at the other end, so that you can see that. This here is the final length, so this is the centre of the quilt that runs through on the diagonal, and as you can see, this one doesn't have any of those quarter square triangles, but instead has the half square triangles that complete the corner. And again, when you cut those, you'll cut your square and you'll cut on the diagonal from left to right, top to bottom, and then the opposite way for the other one, so that you get again the top right, top left, bottom right, bottom left corner units that go properly with the print, the direction of the print. So they are the sections of the quilt. So you'll add the sashing, you'll have the sashing added, so this will go in the middle so that it'll go together with the sashing through the middle. Once you've done that, you'll assemble the quilt across the diagonal as they've been pieced, and then you'll go come to the border print. Once the quilt is together, you're then going to add the border. So the border is made up of a sashing strip and the main border print that you'd previously cut a couple of editions ago. So I got you to cut that 8 3/4 inches by 96. I think it was, or 94. So I got you to cut this border print previously. So that's ready, should be ready for you to go. You will find the centre of both the border print and also the stripe. And again, you'll have to piece this striped print just so that it's of one continuous length, because it's longer than the width of your fabric. So I always find the centre, and I have all the border prints exactly the same, so I'll find the centre of it and I'll find the centre of this. This will be shorter than the border length because it's going to be only attached to the side of the quilt, and you don't have that excess fabric that you'll have with this. You will then join this sashing, border sashing, onto the main border print. Once you've done that and you've pressed it, you will measure out, making sure that you've measured through the centre of the quilt, so that you make sure that your measurements are correct. You will then mark those measurements on to your sashing strip, mark the centre, the edges, and you'll sew from 1/4 inch in on the border length, and you'll attach it from 1/4 inch in on both the sashing and the quilt, and sew that through to 1/4 inch from the raw edge on this end. So you're leaving 1/4 inch. You'll add all 4 sides, and then to complete the quilt you will then miter those corners. This is the final part of the 2017 Mystery Quilt video, and as you can see, the quilt is back from the quilter, who has done a most amazing job, so thank you very much to Jo for all her work. The great reveal, it's a sampler quilt set on point, 13 different blocks covering quite a few techniques, hand piecing, some machine piecing, foundation piecing, reverse applique, broderie purse, traditional needle turn applique, and with a new fabric which I've designed especially for this quilt, which is the red setting triangles at the edges. That's the 2017 Mystery Quilt fabric. So I hope you've enjoyed or are enjoying making this quilt. I've certainly had fun right from the beginning designing the fabric for it, and a great shout out to Penrose Fabrics for reprinting the fabric so that this mystery quilt's been possible in this fabric range, Torrington Place. So I hope you've enjoyed the 2017 Quiltmania Mystery Quilt, that you've had some challenges along the way, and that you can see just your progress in terms of what you're able to do now, and I hope that you enjoy making the rest of the quilt, and that it's a quilt that you can have for many years to come, and an heirloom to pass on to your families. So enjoy. One final thing just to conclude is don't forget to put the label on the back of your quilt. This is really important for future generations to know who made the quilt, where the inspiration came from, and anything else that you'd like to pass on.